This is music, and this is all about that bass. CGC Vinyl has started a fun and important thread. It's very simple actually. Pick out 5 of your favorite bass players, maybe show an album they play on, maybe highlight a song. And the motivation is simply to pay respect to the bass and the bass player, because the bass in rock music is very important but overlooked. It ties everything together. So obviously I want to pay my respect to the bass and the bass player. So I've picked out 5 of my favorite bass players. It's not a top 5. These are not my only favorite bass players. So just so you know. The first one is one of these solid bass players who very often just doubles up on what the guitar plays, thus tying the guitars and the drums together, and also has an awesome, slightly distorted, heavy bass tone with a very rich kind of bass bottom. And I'm talking about Joe Bench from Bolt Thrower. I just like how solid a bass player she is, right? No nonsense, just solidity. And an album worth highlighting is my favorite Bolt Thrower album, as it happens, Those Ones Loyal. This is a very groovy death metal album, and the bass with its solidity and the bass tone, slightly distorted, very rich bottom, is what carries the groove on this album. Ties everything together, carries the groove. And I think the best example of that is what, happens to be my favorite Bolt Thrower song too, and that's the Kill Chain from this album. So Joe Bench. And then of course, Steve Harris. He's an iconic bass player. He has an iconic and unique, instantly recognizable bass sound and style of playing. He brought the bass to the forefront on par with the guitars, and he has so many iconic bass parts. Wrathchild, The Number of the Beast, the Trooper, the sort of galloping part in the Trooper, and the slow galloping part in Stranger in a Strange Land. Maybe some of the breakdowns, like in To Tame a Land, or perhaps Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. There's so many iconic bass parts. I could pick out any song and any album, but just to piss everybody off, I'm going to highlight this one, No Prayer for the Dying. I quite like his work on the bass on this album, in particular in Tail Gunner. Yeah. In Tail Gunner, the guitars are kind of fluid in a way, so it's the bass that kind of gives the song its dynamism and carries the song forward. And I would say it's not a poor man's version of Aces High. The topic is similar, but it's quite obvious that they're not trying to make this song sound like Aces High. They're going for a very, very different sound, a different structure as well. So there you go, Steve Harris. Up next we have Jeroen Boltezeling. From Obscura and Pestilence. He's been in a bunch of bands. He's a very jazzy bass player. I think his background is in flamenco, jazz fusion, and then of course in death metal. He has a very dynamic way of playing the bass. It has this very warm and round sound, because he very often uses fretless bass to play on. And so he's of the similar school as Tony Choi and maybe Steve DiGiorgio, the more kind of jazzy approach. Very dynamic, very proficient bass player. And the album I want to highlight is Cosmogenesis by Obscura. This is technical progressive death metal. And already in the opening song, Anti-Cosmic Overload, it starts out with a crazy bass figure and then it just goes into an insane technical death metal song, and you can hear how dynamic the bass is. To me, it's the bass that pretty much carries the entire song, because the guitar work is so technical and all over the place. The bass too, but because of the nature of the bass, it carries the song to me, and he's a very, very proficient bass player. Up next, I guess this is more one of those solid bass players, Dan Lilker, and in particular I'm thinking about his work in Nuclear Assault. He's one of those bass players. He plays with a pick. He hits the strings really hard. So one of those really loud and kind of aggressive bass players. Very solid too. And what I really like about him and his bass playing is actually the bass tone, in particular on my favorite Nuclear Assault album, Handle with Care. I can't highlight a song here. I can pick any song, so there you go. But awesome bass work. There's a lot of this kind of doubling up on the guitar, but he does have some parts that are kind of divergent from the guitar patterns every now and then. But what I really like is the weird bass tone. It's a heavily distorted bass, and instead of kind of being in the middle and the bottom, it's almost like the bass sounds like it kind of envelops the guitars. It's very interesting, and it makes for a very unique sounding album. To me, this is a thrasher piece. And up last, of course, Misa from Bandmate, because I don't want to disappoint Mark G with the C, the human hype sticker. She is an amazing bass player. She also has a slightly distorted bass tone. She plays with a pick as well, hits the strings really hard. But then she has this technique where she kind of flips up the pick and holds it like between, I think, just with her index finger, and then she can do popping and slapping funky bass. And she's very skilled bass player, and she plays extremely complex bass figures that rarely repeat themselves. There's very little repetition in what she plays, but she still manages to, provide that bass bottom that is so important to rock music, to tie the drums and the guitars together, and at the same time doing almost like lead bass, as it were. And I could pick any album, so I just grabbed World Domination as a random album. Check out any song on here and you can hear what a great musician she is. So yeah, those were 5 of my favorite bass players. It's not a top 5, like I said. I know there are other awesome bass players out there, so don't get your man boobies or whatever in a twist if your favorite bass player was not in this video. Chances are they're also among my favorite bass players, or maybe I don't know their work. In any case, make your own video. How about that? And pay respect to the bass and the bass players. Thanks for watching.